I mean, they brought back a character from the dead over 10 years later. The funny thing about it is her motives, if she's still alive, make complete sense, because I want to get to the sort of the big reveals of this story. What's up, everyone? Big Dan here, and in this video, we are going to talk about the Dragon Age anime series on Netflix. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than my usual videos, which I typically script. This is completely unscripted. I do have some notes which I'll be glancing at on screen, and we're going to split this video into basically two parts. So the first part, I'm going to talk about my first impressions and the overall quality of the show in a kind of spoiler-free fashion. And in the second half of the video, we'll talk about the most interesting lore pieces and the story of Dragon Age Absolution, because there are some bombshell revelations in this anime show which will have implications for Dragon Age 4. I'm mostly going to be showing footage of Dragon Age Inquisition in this video because I don't want to catch a copyright strike from Netflix, but I will be showing a few screen captures of the show so you can see what the characters look like and that sort of thing. So let's start off with the basics. Dragon Age Absolution is a 6-episode anime series based on the games that is set after Dragon Age Inquisition, and will probably tie into the next Dragon Age game because the show is primarily set in Tevinter, which is also the setting of the upcoming Dragon Age Dreadwolf. And for starters, is the show worth watching? Yeah, I'd say it's absolutely worth watching. I don't think it's quite as good as Edgerunners, but it's a very good show, and because it's so short, you can pretty much watch the entire thing in an afternoon. Each episode's about 20 minutes when you cut out all the credits and whatnot, so if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend going to check it out. First off, I want to say the art style is absolutely incredible. I haven't really gotten into anime until recently, mostly because of Edgerunners and Genshin Impact, and now I'm starting to get a little bit deeper into anime as more video game franchises make anime shows. And I really do like the art style. I feel like it fits Dragon Age very well, the cinematics and everything. It's a very well-produced show in that regard in terms of the art style. Also, the voice acting is top tier. One of the main characters of the show is voiced by the same woman who plays Ashley Williams in the Mass Effect shows, which is something that I couldn't get over as I was watching this. And yeah, so overall, just in terms of the production quality and the storytelling, everything is really top-notch. So what about the story itself? Again, I would say it's a pretty damn good story. It features a lot of the things that you would expect to see in a Dragon Age show, things like betrayal, dark themes, dark fantasy, all that kind of stuff comes into play. And it really deals with some of the heavy tone and themes that you would expect with a game set in Tevinter. Now, if you're familiar with the Dragon Age series, you'll know that in Tevinter, slavery is legal, and the slave trade is still very active, and also the government in Tevinter is very open to things like blood magic and more like dark rituals and that sort of thing. So all of those themes are explored thoroughly in the show, and I feel like they do a really good job of that. So with all that out of the way, I would say if you haven't seen Dragon Age Absolution, I would definitely recommend checking it out if you get the chance. So now let's talk about the spoilers and the story. So the basic story of Dragon Age Absolution is centered around a heist, which is very interesting to me in particular because that was actually one of the original plot lines for Dragon Age 4 in a project called Dragon Age Joplin. And the game was going to be set in Tevinter and set around a series of heists with a group of characters. So I kind of wonder if that story that was originally going to be told in Dragon Age 4 kind of made its way into the Netflix show. It's a very interesting connection there. Again, one of the main characters of the show is an elf named Miriam, and she is voiced by the same woman who plays Ashley Williams. So the whole time I was just thinking, if she starts reading poetry, I'm gonna absolutely lose it. I don't know, it's just really funny to see that voice actress come back for this, and I'm glad to see that she's still getting work on BioWare-related projects, and I'm curious to see if she will make an appearance in Dragon Age 4, because she's always done a really good job. So Ashley Williams' character, Miriam, is basically asked by her hot mage ex-girlfriend to take part in a heist in Tevinter. And she's not exactly stoked to do this because she was a slave. She grew up as a slave in Tevinter and before escaping. And so she's not thrilled to be a part of this project and is initially very reluctant. But again, that hot ex-girlfriend is able to convince her to join the heist. because she's the only one who really has like a detailed in-person experience on the inside of the Chantry. And so the job that they're trying to pull off is they're going to steal a magical artifact from the Chantry in Tevinter. So at the end of the first episode, you basically see them breaking into the vault and being like, we're in. In the second episode, we meet the other main characters of the show on the other side in Tevinter, which basically shows a Magister and his guard captain / lover expecting the artifact in the Chantry, which is called the Circulum Infinitus. And basically what this artifact does is it's kind of a necromantic artifact. It can raise people from the dead and bring them back just like they were. The only catch is that you have to use blood magic and sacrifices in order to actually make this happen. So you basically have to kill someone to bring another person back to life. And this Magister is trying to find a way around that, and so he contacts a spirit in order to try to figure out, what ways can we use to, avoid blood magic in this little ritual, because he's obviously trying to bring someone back from the dead, which we'll find out more about later. But fast forwarding a little bit, Hera and Fairbanks, the other person sort of running the heist, break into the vault and end up getting access to the artifact. But before they can grab it, Fairbanks actually stabs Hera in the back and runs off with the artifact himself. But he kind of underestimates Hera a little bit, and she ends up fatally wounding him at the end of this. And then Miriam stumbles upon Fairbanks' body with the artifact. At this point, the Tevinter Chantry's security measures all get tripped, which basically involves a dragon and an army of the undead. And so the crew has to figure out how to escape with the artifact and not get caught by the Tevinters. And unfortunately, Hera is basically locked in this sort of magical prison. She can't get out. And so the gang has to escape without her at the end of the episode. And at this point, the Magister has basically been placed onto lockdown, but he doesn't obey it. And he ends up catching up with the thieves there, and it turns out that he knows Miriam, and he was actually Miriam's former master. And at this point, we really learn how dark Miriam's story really is. It has a lot of parallels with Fenris, but it ends up being a lot darker than that, actually. So basically, how Miriam ended up escaping Tevinter was during this Magister's harrowing ceremony, he almost gets possessed by a demon. And the Magister's mom ends up intervening and trying to save her son, and in the process ends up possessing Miriam's brother with a demon instead, as well as another slave. Miriam loses it, ends up killing her brother to save herself, and then killing the Magister's mom before escaping to Tevinter. So extremely dark. She ends up killing her own brother as well as her former master. Basically, at this point, the Magister is trying to win her back, trying to show her that, like, she can come back to Tevinter. He will treat her well, make her his, like, right-hand woman, and use this artifact to bring her brother back from the dead, which is basically what he's been trying to do this whole time. She ends up rejecting his offer and getting shot in the back by a guard's arrow before the gang escapes the Chantry and goes back to their safe house. And then later on, the Magister ends up contacting Miriam via blood magic, trying to convince her again, showing her glimpses of what her future life could look like at his side in a politically restored Tevinter. She basically rejects this because obviously, like, her experience growing up in Tevinter was very different than the sort of rose-colored picture that he is painting for her. And so she wants nothing to do with that. His next piece of leverage is that he has Hera captive and is willing to give her back in exchange for this artifact. Miriam and the gang end up hatching a plan to break back in and try to rescue Hera. And at this point, I'm going to, kind of gloss over some details and skip ahead a little bit because I want to get to the big reveals of this story. During the process of them trying to go back in there and save Hera, Hera ends up escaping on her own and heading back to the safe house. She ends up snatching up the artifact, and right as she's about to leave, the rest of the gang comes in and kind of corners her. And they're kind of like, hey, what you doing with that artifact there? Turns out she was planning to betray the party the whole time. I felt like this reveal was really well done. I actually wasn't expecting this. Dragon Age is a series with a lot of betrayals, and there were many betrayals shown in the show earlier on, like Fairbanks and potentially the dwarf character, as well as a few others. This one actually ended up catching me off guard. I felt like Hera was a really well-written character, and she turns out to be like a complete sociopath, which was totally wild to see. Basically, her goal is she grew up in Tevinter, and she has a lot of resentment of Tevinter because her father and her family were killed by the Venatori when she was very young. And her goal now is to just see Tevinter burn. She wants to completely destroy Tevinter. So the big kind of reveal in this moment was that she actually had cut a deal with this Magister to steal the artifact, the Circulum Infinitus, from him. And he was going to allow this to happen in exchange for Miriam. So basically, she was going to sell her ex-girlfriend into slavery in order to get this artifact. And that was why he was willing to agree to this crazy plan. I just love the whole sequence of this reveal here, too, like the cinematics of it. She's sort of standing in front of a fire as this is all playing out, and there's just these flames raging behind her as she's talking about her plans and everything. Completely wild. One of the craziest parts of this, too, is that Miriam still wants to get back together with Hera at the end of this. She's like, babe, we can make this work. I know you tried to sell me into slavery, but we can still make this work, babe. It was just totally insane to me. It was just like, damn, that must have been some good pussy if she was just willing to be like, oh, I know you were going to sell me into slavery and all, but we can still get back together. Come on. So anyhow, the Magister shows up, and he's controlling the dragon via blood magic, which also was very interesting that how quickly that guy slipped into blood magic. Because at the very beginning, he's like, oh yeah, I don't want to use blood magic. And then like 10 minutes later, he's using all of the blood magic that could possibly be used. They end up defeating the Magister in the end. Miriam ends up killing him, but Hera ends up escaping during this process as well. And this is sort of where we are left at the end of Dragon Age Absolution, with a cliffhanger that sort of leads into the next game. So I'm curious to see if these characters are going to come back into Dragon Age 4, and I imagine that this plotline might be continued as at least maybe a side story in the game, sort of like how Cerberus acts in Mass Effect 3, where you have the big conflict with the Reapers and then the minor conflict with Cerberus. So I could see a scenario where these characters kind of come back in sort of a minor plotline below the Solus plotline in Dragon Age 4. But the most interesting thing about this anime was the reveal at the very end. Now, I've talked about before how Dragon Age has a history of bringing characters back from the dead. They've done it at least half a dozen times, and they will probably do it more. And they did it in this show in a way that I was really not expecting. Now, initially, the group had planned to steal the Circulum Infinitus and give it to the Inquisition. That was the plan. But Hera's alternate plan was to actually give it to the Red Templars and someone named the Crimson Knight. Who is the Crimson Knight, you might ask? Well, they show her in the last scene of the show. Basically, a huge block of red lyrium. And it turns out to be Meredith, who died at the end of Dragon Age 2. I mean, they brought back a character from the dead over 10 years later. I just, dude, I couldn't believe it. I absolutely couldn't believe it. I'm just blown away by it. If Meredith is coming back in Dragon Age 4, it's like, at this point, is anybody ever really dead in Dragon Age? It's just so crazy to me. So I was completely floored by that. I couldn't stop laughing after seeing her at the end of the show. And I don't know. I just don't know what to think about it at this point. The funny thing about it is her motives, if she's still alive, make complete sense. Because if we remember to Dragon Age 2, she was very obsessed about taking out blood mages and really, stopping those blood mages. Well, where are the most blood mages in the world? They're in Tevinter. So it would make sense that she would want to go out and destroy Tevinter. But still, she was dead. She was dead at the end of Dragon Age 2 10 years ago. So I'm at a loss at this point. So yeah. Overall, I really liked Dragon Age Absolution. The ending kind of threw me off, and they left things open on a cliffhanger with Hera and the rest of the gang trying to then go pursue Hera. I am curious to see if they bring these characters into Dragon Age 4. I could see that as a distinct possibility. Perhaps some of these characters link up with the remnants of the Inquisition, which was actually kind of who they were working for in this series, and, you know, become your companions in the next game. I could definitely see that happening, but I guess we will see. So there you have it. The Dragon Age anime was absolutely wild. If you haven't checked it out already, go watch it on Netflix. It's a pretty interesting show and it was really entertaining. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to Big Dan Gaming for more Dragon Age and RPG videos. Big shout out to all the channel members for supporting my content. Until next time, this has been Big Dan. I should go.